The millionaire's laugh echoed across the manicured lawn as his fiancée's hand connected with the nanny's cheek. What Madison didn't know was that she'd just struck the only woman Preston had ever truly loved. The quiet nanny wasn't just caring for his daughter. She was his daughter's mother. Have you ever been in a room where someone disrespected the person who mattered most to you? Hi, viewers. Kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. If you've ever wondered what happens when buried secrets explode in front of everyone who matters, this story will leave you questioning everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and the price of success. One slap, one laugh, one truth that destroyed everything. Have you watched someone judge based on appearances alone? This wasn't just about a nanny being mistreated. This was about a mother being humiliated in front of her own child. But what Preston did next? It changed everything. Stay with me as we uncover how a broke man from Detroit became a millionaire, lost his soulmate, and watched his carefully constructed world crumble with 5 words. Before we dive in, hit that like button if you're ready for a story that'll make you rethink everything about love and sacrifice. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The sound of Madison's palm meeting Alea's cheek cut through the champagne laughter like a gunshot, but Preston's reaction wasn't what anyone expected. Crystal glasses froze mid-sip as the crack echoed across the perfectly manicured lawn. The mimosas suddenly tasted bitter. The Carolina sun felt too hot, and designer dresses seemed to shrink under the weight of collective shock. Madison Whitmore stood there, her manicured hands still trembling from the impact, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the afternoon light. She wore a white sundress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and her eyes blazed with the kind of rage that comes from feeling threatened by someone she considered beneath her. "You don't belong in this family," she snarled at Alea, her Connecticut accent sharp enough to cut glass. "Know your place." Alea Williams didn't flinch. At 34, she had the kind of quiet strength that came from surviving things that would break weaker people. Her dark skin showed the red mark of Madison's hand, but her eyes remained steady. She wore simple black slacks and a cream blouse, professional, modest, nothing that screamed for attention. Yet somehow, she commanded the space in a way Madison never could. The backyard party had been perfect until that moment. Preston's Eastover mansion gleamed behind them, all Southern charm and old money elegance. 20 of Charlotte's elite had gathered for what was supposed to be a casual brunch celebrating his engagement to Madison. Real estate moguls, bank presidents, country club queens, all frozen like statues witnessing a car crash. 6-year-old Emma sat at the children's table, her big brown eyes wide with confusion. She looked exactly like her father, same dark hair, same intelligent gaze. But there was something else there, something that made certain guests shift uncomfortably when they looked too closely. Then Preston laughed. Not a cruel laugh, not an agreeing laugh, a laugh of pure, bitter disbelief. He was 42, built like he still remembered his construction days before the money came. 6 feet tall with hands that had known real work, wearing a casual button-down that couldn't hide the intensity radiating from him. When he stepped forward, conversations died. "Excuse me." His voice was deadly calm, the kind of quiet that made grown men nervous. Madison spun toward him, expecting support, her diamond engagement ring catching the light. "Preston," she was being disrespectful. "I simply put her in her place. The help needs to understand boundaries." The help. Preston's dark eyes locked with Alea's across the chaos. For just a moment, something passed between them. A look that spoke of intimacy Madison couldn't comprehend, of bodies that remembered what minds had forced themselves to forget. Alea's breath caught almost imperceptibly. Her fingers tightened around the juice box she'd been opening for Emma, and Preston noticed. He always noticed everything about her. "Madison," he said, never breaking eye contact with Alea, "you have exactly 10 seconds to apologize." The party guests exchanged glances. This wasn't the Preston they knew, the smooth businessman who hosted charity galas and played golf with senators. This was someone raw, dangerous, protective. Madison's laugh was shrill. Apologize? To the nanny? Preston, have you lost your mind? She's an employee. My employee, actually, since we're getting married. That's when Preston's composure cracked. He turned to face Madison, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Your employee? Your employee? Mrs. Henderson from the country club whispered to her husband. The Ashworth twins stopped pretending to check their phones. Even the catering staff paused their cleanup to watch. Preston took a step closer to Madison, his voice dropping to that tone that made board meetings uncomfortable. Let me explain something to you, Madison. That woman you just disrespected? That woman you think doesn't belong in this family. Madison's confidence wavered for the first time. Something in Preston's voice, in the way he looked at Alea, made her stomach twist with a fear she didn't understand. She's not just the nanny, Preston continued, each word deliberate and clear. She's not just some employee you can dismiss. She's not just someone who doesn't belong. Alea's eyes widened. She shook her head slightly, silently begging him to stop, but Preston was past the point of secrets. You just disrespected the only woman who ever saved my life. Madison's face went white. The party guests leaned forward. Emma stopped coloring. Have you ever witnessed someone you care about being publicly humiliated? What would you do if your partner disrespected someone precious to you? Tell me in the comments. How far would you go to defend someone's dignity? Because what happened next changed everything. Preston looked around at all those shocked faces, at Madison's horror, at Alea's quiet panic, and made a choice that would destroy his carefully constructed world. And before you say another word about who belongs in this family, he said, his voice carrying across the silent lawn, you should know that Alea isn't just taking care of my daughter. She is Emma's mother. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison's knees nearly buckled. Mrs. Henderson actually gasped out loud. And Alea? She closed her eyes like she was in physical pain, because the secret that had protected them all for 6 years had just exploded in front of everyone who mattered in Charlotte society. As Preston stepped forward, his voice dropped to a tone that made grown men nervous. You just disrespected the only woman who ever saved my life. Madison's face went white. She had no idea what storm she just unleashed. 12 years earlier, Preston Hartley was counting pills in a Detroit motel room, deciding if 37 was enough to end the pain of losing everything he'd ever built. The room smelled like bleach and broken dreams, rain hammering the windows like bullets. His reflection in the cracked mirror showed a man who'd lost not just his fortune, but his will to fight for another sunrise. Construction business gone. House foreclosed. Wife remarried to his former business partner. At 30, Preston had watched 12 years of blood, sweat, and 18-hour days disappear in a legal battle that left him with nothing but debt and rage. The pills rattled in the amber bottle like dice in a gambler's hand. OxyContin, easy enough to get when you knew the right desperate people. 37 would be plenty. Maybe peaceful. He'd driven from Detroit to Atlanta with his last $200, telling himself he was looking for a fresh start. Really, he was looking for a place where nobody knew his name when they found a body. The rain kept falling. His phone had been shut off for 3 weeks. His stomach hadn't seen food in 2 days. At 2 a.m., hunger finally drove him outside. The Waffle House on Peachtree Street glowed like a lighthouse for lost souls. Truckers, night shift workers, people running from whatever darkness chased them, all seeking comfort in cheap coffee and fluorescent lights. That's where he saw her. Alea Williams moved between tables like she was dancing, balancing plates with the grace of someone who'd been doing this for years. 22 years old, wearing a uniform that had seen better days, but her smile was genuine for every customer. Real warmth in a world that had gone cold for Preston. You eating, honey, or just hiding from the rain? Her voice had a soft Georgia accent that made even the simple questions sound like caring. Preston looked up from the corner booth where he'd been nursing a cup of coffee for an hour. She was beautiful, but not in the fake way his ex-wife had been. Natural beauty, the kind that came from having a good heart. Just coffee, he mumbled, staring at his hands. Something in his voice made her pause. Maybe it was the emptiness. Maybe it was how his clothes hung loose on a frame that had recently carried more weight. Maybe it was the way he couldn't meet her eyes. When's the last time you ate something real? She asked quietly. Does it matter? Alea slid into the booth across from him without being invited. Bold move for a waitress talking to a stranger, but something about this man tugged at her heart. She'd grown up with an alcoholic father and a mother who worked 3 jobs. She recognized rock bottom when she saw it. It matters, she said simply. Preston finally looked up. Her eyes were warm brown, concerned but not pitying. It was the last time someone had looked at him like he was worth saving. I don't have money for food, he admitted. 5 minutes later, she placed a plate in front of him. Eggs, bacon, hash browns, toast. Chef made too much, she lied easily. Hate to see it go to waste. Preston's hands shook as he picked up the fork. When was the last time someone had shown him kindness without wanting something back? I'm Alea, she said, refilling his coffee. Preston. Nice to meet you, Preston. You passing through, or staying in Atlanta? He almost laughed. Staying? He'd be gone by sunrise, one way or another. Just passing through. But something about the way she said his name, like it mattered, made him want to keep talking. Lost my business in Detroit. Lost everything, really. Alea nodded like she understood. I lost everything once, too. Came here from Savannah with $43 and a suitcase held together with duct tape. What happened? Life happened. But I'm still here. She smiled. It was the first beautiful thing Preston had seen in months. Sometimes losing everything is just life making room for something better. They talked until her shift ended at 6 a.m. About dreams and failures, about the weight of starting over, about how hard it was to trust that tomorrow might be different from yesterday. When she grabbed her purse to leave, Preston felt panic rising. The pills were still in his pocket. If she left, he'd go back to that room, and this time he wouldn't chicken out. Alea, he called out, his voice cracking slightly. She turned back. I was going to do something stupid tonight. Really stupid. But talking to you, I don't know. Maybe I won't. She studied his face for a long moment, seeing something that made her walk back to the table. You got a place to stay? Motel room. You got plans tomorrow? Not really. Good. Meet me here at noon. I know a place that needs construction workers. Cash daily. No questions asked. Preston stared at her. Why would you do that for a stranger? Alea smiled, and it was soft and real and dangerous to his damaged heart. Because sometimes strangers are just friends we haven't helped yet. That morning, for the first time in months, Preston threw the pills away. Have you ever had someone see your worth when you couldn't see it yourself? Someone who stepped into your darkness and lit a match? Tell me in the comments about a time when a stranger's kindness changed everything for you. Because what Preston didn't know was that this beautiful woman who'd just saved his life was about to become so much more than his rescuer. She was about to become his reason for living again. 6 months later, Preston was standing in the Atlanta morning sun, sweat dripping down his back as he hammered nails into a roof frame, wondering how his heart had learned to beat again. The construction crew Alea had connected him with was rough around the edges. Ex-cons, immigrants, men running from something, but they worked hard and paid daily. More importantly, they didn't ask questions about his past or judge him for sleeping in his car those first few weeks. Yo, Preston, called Marcus, the crew chief. You got a visitor. Preston looked down from the scaffolding to see Alea standing by the job site fence, wearing jeans and a yellow sundress that made her glow like sunrise. She held 2 paper bags and wore that smile that had been pulling him back from the edge for months. Lunch break. Preston called to the crew, climbing down faster than was probably safe. They'd been meeting for lunch twice a week since that first night at the Waffle House. Sometimes she'd bring food from the diner. Sometimes they'd walk through Piedmont Park, talking about everything and nothing. She never asked him for anything, never pushed him to share more than he was ready to give. But Preston was ready to give her everything. Hey, beautiful, he said, accepting the bag that smelled like heaven. You didn't have to drive all the way out here. I was in the neighborhood, she lied, and they both knew it. Her apartment was 20 minutes in the wrong direction, and she just finished a double shift at the diner. They found a shady spot under an oak tree, spreading out the food she'd packed. Fried chicken, biscuits, sweet tea cold enough to make you grateful for Georgia summers. How's the job going? She asked, watching him eat like every bite made her happy. Good. Really good. Preston's hands were rough now, calloused from honest work. His body had filled out again, muscle replacing the hollow desperation that had brought him to Atlanta. Marcus says I might be ready for crew chief on the next project. That's wonderful. Her smile could have powered the city. I'm proud of you. Those 4 words hit him like a truck. When was the last time someone had been proud of him? When was the last time someone's opinion mattered this much? Alea, he said quietly, setting down his chicken, I need to tell you something. She nodded, giving him that patient attention that had been healing him piece by piece. That night we met, I wasn't just passing through Atlanta. I was done with everything. I had pills in my pocket and a plan to use them. Her hand found his across the blanket, warm and steady. You saved my life that night. Not just with the food or the job connection. You made me feel like maybe I was worth saving. Preston. No, let me finish. He turned his hand palm up, threading their fingers together. I know we've been taking this slow. I know you're being careful with me because you think I'm still broken. But I need you to know, I'm falling in love with you. Alea's breath caught. They'd been dancing around this feeling for months, both too scared to name it. I love you too, she whispered, and the words hung between them like a promise. Preston leaned forward, cupping her face with his free hand. Her skin was warm from the sun, soft under his calloused palm. Can I kiss you? Instead of answering, she closed the distance between them. The kiss was everything Preston hadn't known he was starving for. Soft and sweet at first, then deeper as she melted against him. She tasted like sweet tea and hope, and when her fingers curled in his work shirt, he felt something shift inside his chest. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Alea's eyes were dark with want. My place isn't much, she said quietly, but it's got air conditioning and privacy. Preston's pulse jumped. Are you sure? Her answer was pulling him to his feet. Alea's apartment was a studio in a building that had seen better decades, but she'd made it home with plants and books and photographs of family. Preston barely noticed the details because she was kissing him again, backing him toward the bed, her hands exploring the muscles that months of hard work had rebuilt. I've wanted this for so long, she breathed against his neck, her lips finding that sensitive spot that made him groan. Alea, we don't have to. I want to, she said firmly, looking up at him with eyes full of certainty. I want you. They undressed each other slowly, reverently. Preston mapped every inch of her skin with his hands and mouth, worshiping the woman who'd brought him back to life. When she arched beneath him, calling his name like a prayer, he felt something he'd thought was dead forever. Purpose, belonging, love. Afterward, they lay tangled in her sheets, the Atlanta afternoon filtering through thin curtains. Preston traced patterns on her shoulder, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. What are you thinking? She asked, her voice sleepy and satisfied. I want to build something with you, he said. Something real. Something that lasts. Alea lifted her head to look at him, and what she saw in his eyes made her heart race. What kind of something? Everything, he said simply. A business. A home. A future. She kissed his chest, right over his heart. I'd like that. Have you ever felt that moment when everything clicked into place? When you knew your life was about to change forever? Tell me in the comments about a time when love gave you the courage to dream bigger than you ever thought possible. Because Preston and Alea had no idea that building something real together would be more complicated than either of them imagined. Success has a price, and sometimes the cost is higher than love can afford. 2 years later, Preston stood in the lobby of his first real estate office, watching Alea hang their business license on the wall, and wondered if happiness this big was legal. Hartley and Associates Real Estate occupied the ground floor of a renovated warehouse in downtown Atlanta. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting golden rectangles across hardwood floors they'd refinished themselves. It's crooked, Alea called from where she balanced on a stepladder, adjusting the frame for the third time. It's perfect, Preston said, admiring the view of her legs and the pencil skirt she wore for their grand opening. 2 years of regular meals and happiness had been good to both of them. She was softer now, more confident, and absolutely beautiful. Preston Hartley, you're not even looking at the license. I'm looking at something much better. She shot him a look over her shoulder that promised consequences later, and his pulse quickened. 2 years together, and she still made his blood race with nothing more than a glance. The door chimed as their first client walked in, Mrs. Chun, an elderly woman looking to sell her family home. Preston straightened his tie and switched into business mode, but he caught Alea's encouraging smile and felt invincible. 6 months ago, they'd been sharing her tiny studio apartment and dreaming about maybe opening their own agency someday. Then Preston had found a foreclosed property in a neighborhood everyone else had written off. He'd seen potential where others saw problems, bought it with their combined savings, and flipped it for a profit that made them both dizzy. One property became 5. 5 became 12. Suddenly, they had enough money for office space, business licenses, and dreams they'd been afraid to speak out loud. "Welcome to Hartley and Associates," Alea said warmly, extending her hand to Mrs. Chun. "I'm Alea Williams, and this is Preston Hartley. We're so glad you chose us." Preston watched her work, professional and warm, making Mrs. Chun feel like family instead of just another commission. This was why their business was growing so fast. Alea had a gift for making people feel seen and valued. By lunch, they'd signed 3 new listings and had appointments scheduled through the following week. "We did it," Preston said, pulling Alea into his arms as soon as Mrs. Chun left. "We actually did it." "We did," she laughed, spinning in his embrace. "Can you believe it? I can believe anything when I'm with you." The kiss that followed was celebration and promise wrapped together. When her phone buzzed with a text, they ignored it. When it buzzed again, she reluctantly pulled back to check. Her expression changed immediately. "What is it?" Preston asked. "My doctor's office. They want me to come in to discuss my test results." Preston felt ice form in his stomach. "Test results? What test results? You didn't tell me you were sick." "I'm not sick." Alea's voice was strange, careful. "At least I don't think I'm sick. I've been tired lately, and my cycle's been off. So I went to get checked out." The silence stretched between them as understanding dawned on both their faces. "Alea," Preston said quietly, "are you pregnant?" She stared at the phone in her hand. "I don't know. Maybe. The blood work will tell us for sure." Preston's mind raced. A baby. Their baby. The thought should have terrified him. They were just getting the business off the ground, barely making ends meet, living day to day. Instead, he felt something that surprised him. Joy. "How do you feel about that possibility?" he asked carefully. Alea looked up at him, searching his face. Scared, excited, terrified, happy. She laughed shakily, all of it at once. "How do you feel?" Preston cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "I feel like the luckiest man alive. Business partner, best friend, love of my life, and maybe the mother of my child. How'd I get so fortunate?" Relief flooded her expression. "So if I'm pregnant, we're doing this." "Alea Williams, I want to do everything with you. Everything." The doctor's appointment confirmed what they both already knew in their hearts. 8 weeks pregnant. Due date in March. That night, they celebrated in their bed, making love with a tenderness that was different from their usual passion. Every touch felt sacred, reverent. Preston kissed her still flat stomach and whispered promises to the tiny life growing inside her. "I love you," he murmured against her skin. "Both of you." Alea's fingers tangled in his hair, holding him close. "We love you too." Later, as she slept curled against his chest, Preston stared at the ceiling and made silent vows. He would give this woman and their child everything. Security, comfort, a life where they never had to worry about money or safety or whether tomorrow would be better than today. He would build an empire if that's what it took. 3 months later, their real estate business was booming. 6 months after that, Preston had expanded into commercial properties. By the time Emma Hartley was born, 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfect, they had moved into a house in Virginia Highland and were discussing opening a second office. Preston held his daughter for the first time and understood why men moved mountains. This tiny person, with Alea's eyes and his stubborn chin, was his whole world. She was perfect, and she was theirs. "She's beautiful," Alea whispered from the hospital bed, exhausted but glowing. She's everything. Preston agreed, already planning the life he would build for his girls. What he didn't know was that building that life would require choices he wasn't prepared to make. Success would demand sacrifices that would test the very love that had saved them both. Have you ever held something so precious that you'd do anything to protect it, even if that protection came at a cost you never saw coming? Tell me in the comments about a moment when love made you promise things you didn't know you'd have to sacrifice everything to keep. Because Preston's promises to his newborn daughter were about to collide with a world that had very different ideas about who deserved success, love, and acceptance. 5 years after Emma's birth, Preston stood in the marble lobby of Charlotte's most exclusive country club, wearing a $10,000 suit and wondering when winning had started to feel like losing. The Queen City Business Association's annual gala buzzed around him, Charlotte's elites celebrating another year of prosperity and influence. Real estate moguls, bank presidents, old tobacco money mixing with new tech fortunes. This was the room where deals were made and reputations were forged. Preston belonged here now. Hartley & Associates had become Hartley Development Corporation, with offices in 4 cities and a portfolio worth $80 million. He owned a mansion in Eastover, drove cars worth more than most people's houses, and had his picture in Charlotte magazine as one of the city's 40 under 40. So why did he feel like he was drowning? Preston Hartley, boomed Richard Whitmore, approaching with a crystal tumbler of bourbon and the kind of smile that meant business. The man of the hour. I've been wanting to introduce you to my daughter. Preston forced a smile, accepting the older man's handshake. Richard Whitmore owned half of uptown Charlotte and had the political connections to make or break careers. His endorsement had opened doors that Preston's talent alone never could have. Richard, always a pleasure. Madison, come meet the young man I've been telling you about. She glided over like she'd been choreographed. Madison Whitmore, 31 years old, blonde in that expensive way that required monthly maintenance, wearing a dress that cost more than most people's cars. She was beautiful in the way socialite magazines defined beauty. Perfect teeth, perfect skin, perfectly controlled everything. Mr. Hartley, she said, extending a manicured hand. Daddy's told me so much about your success story. Very impressive. Her smile was practiced, professional. This wasn't a coincidence encounter. This was a setup, and they all knew it. Thank you. And please call me Preston. Preston. She tested his name like she was trying on jewelry. I'd love to hear more about your expansion plans. Perhaps over dinner. The invitation hung in the air like a business proposition, which Preston supposed it was. Madison Whitmore came with connections, social status, and acceptance in circles that still looked at his background with barely concealed suspicion. That sounds lovely, he heard himself say, hating every word. 3 hours later, Preston sat in his Bentley outside the club, phone pressed to his ear, trying to explain to Alea why he'd be late coming home. A business dinner, he repeated, with some potential investors. On a Saturday night? Alea's voice carried that note of concern that had been creeping in more often lately. Preston, you've been working 18-hour days for months. Emma misses you. I miss you. Guilt twisted in his chest. I know, baby. I know. But this could be huge for us. For Emma's future. What about Emma's present? She asked me today why Daddy doesn't read her bedtime stories anymore. The words hit like a physical blow. Why had he stopped reading to his daughter? Why had business calls become more important than bedtime routines? Alea, I'm doing this for both of you. Everything I'm building. I never asked you to build an empire, Preston. I fell in love with the man who was happy hammering nails and eating takeout on my couch. The line went quiet for a moment. Years of unspoken tension finally finding voice. Things are different now, he said quietly. We're different now. Are we? Or are you just forgetting who we used to be? Preston closed his eyes, seeing her face in his mind. Alea at 24, laughing as she painted their first office. Alea pregnant, glowing as they picked out baby furniture. Alea now, beautiful and tired and increasingly distant as his world expanded beyond anything they dreamed. I have to go, he said, hating himself for it. Madison's waiting. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Madison, Madison Whitmore, Richard's daughter. It's just business, Alea. But even as he said it, he knew it was more complicated than that. Madison represented something he'd never had, acceptance into a world that had always looked down on him. She was blonde and polished and came with a pedigree that opened doors Alea's love, however deep, never could. Just business, Alea repeated, her voice flat. Right. Well, don't let me keep you from your business dinner. The line went dead. Preston stared at his phone, then at his reflection in the rearview mirror. Armani suit, Rolex watch, leather seats that cost more than he used to make in a month. He looked successful. He looked like he belonged. So why did he feel like he was betraying everything that mattered? His phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Looking forward to dinner. I think we could be very good for each other. Another text, this one from Alea. Emma's asleep. I told her you'd see her in the morning. Try not to disappoint her again. Preston sat in that parking lot for 10 minutes. Engine running, air conditioning battling the Carolina heat, choice spread out before him like a crossroads. On one side, the woman who'd saved his life, built a business with him, given him a daughter who was his whole heart. Love that was real, but complicated by success neither of them had been prepared for. On the other side, a world that promised acceptance, influence, and a kind of power that could protect everything he'd built. He put the car in drive and headed toward the restaurant where Madison waited. Have you ever felt caught between who you were and who you thought you needed to become? Between love that felt real and success that demanded compromise? Tell me in the comments about a time when ambition tested everything you thought you valued. Because the choice Preston made that night would set in motion events that would eventually lead to a backyard in Charlotte, a slap that echoed like thunder, and secrets that would destroy everything he thought he'd protected. The road to that mansion, that party, that moment of truth, started with one dinner and a decision that felt like survival, but would prove to be the beginning of the end. 3 months later, Alea stared at the pregnancy test in the cramped bathroom of their shared apartment. 2 pink lines stared back at her like a fork in the road of their future. Preston was in the shower, humming some old Motown song he'd picked up from her playlist. The sound of running water, mixed with his voice, created a soundtrack to what felt like the most important moment of her life. She walked to the kitchen, Tess still trembling in her hands. The small apartment they'd moved into together felt even smaller now. Preston's business was growing, but they weren't there yet. Not financially, not emotionally ready for this kind of responsibility. When he stepped out, hair dripping wet with just a towel around his waist, she held up the test without saying a word. Preston's face went through about 5 different emotions in 10 seconds. Shock, fear, joy, panic, then something she couldn't quite read. How do you feel about this? He asked, sitting down beside her on their secondhand couch. Scared, she admitted, but also happy, I think. He pulled her close, her head resting against his damp chest. We can do this, baby. We're building something real together. But reality hit different when morning sickness started. Alea couldn't keep down the smell of coffee, which meant she couldn't work her morning shifts at the diner. Preston picked up extra hours, leaving before dawn and coming home after dark. Their intimate moments became stolen kisses between exhaustion and worry. One night, as she lay curled up on the couch, too nauseous to eat the dinner he'd brought home, Preston sat on the floor beside her. What if I can't provide for you both? His voice cracked with a vulnerability she'd never heard before. You already are, she whispered, running her fingers through his hair. You saved me from Detroit too, remember? I was waitressing with no plan, no future, but the pressure was getting to him. She could see it in how he checked their bank account obsessively, how he'd stare at the ceiling at night when he thought she was sleeping. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in her second trimester. Preston had been at a business meeting that could change everything, a potential investor for his real estate venture. She'd been home all day, battling nausea and trying to research baby names online. He walked through the door with a look she'd never seen before. Not excitement, not disappointment, something heavier. The investor wants to meet my team, he said, setting down his briefcase. He's old school, traditional, asked about my family situation. Alea sat up straighter. What did you tell him? I told him I was focused on business right now. That personal complications weren't part of my 5-year plan. The words hit her like a physical blow. Personal complications. Is that what we are? She asked quietly. A complication? Preston ran his hands over his face. You know that's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? He was quiet for too long. In that silence, she heard everything he wasn't saying. This investor could change our lives, Alea. Set us up for real success. But he's from a different generation. He has expectations about how business partners should present themselves. You mean he has expectations about who you should be with? That's not fair, isn't it? She stood up, her hand instinctively moving to her growing belly. What happens when the baby comes? Do we become even more of a complication? Don't twist this around. But she could see the truth in his eyes. He was already calculating, already weighing their love against his ambition. That night, they made love with a desperation that felt like goodbye. Her body pressed against his in their small bed, both of them holding on too tight, as if they could somehow love away the growing distance between who they were and who the world expected them to be. Afterward, as Preston slept, Alea stared at the ceiling and felt something break inside her chest. 2 weeks later, she made a decision that would haunt them both. She left a letter on the kitchen table and moved back to Charlotte, to her sister's house. The letter was simple. Build your empire. I'll raise our child. We both deserve to have our dreams come true. Preston found her 3 days later, standing in her sister's garden, hand on her belly, tears streaming down her face. You don't get to make this choice alone, he said. Watch me. I love you. I know. But love isn't always enough. They stood there in the Carolina heat, two people who'd saved each other from their worst moments, now facing the possibility that their love might not survive their best intentions. Have you ever loved someone so much that you were willing to walk away to protect their future? Preston reached for her hand. There has to be another way. Maybe there is, she said quietly. But I can't be the reason you don't become everything you're meant to be. The conversation that followed would determine everything, not just their future, but their daughter's entire childhood. What they decided next would echo through the next 12 years, leading to that moment on Preston's lawn when Madison's hand would connect with Alea's face. But first, they had to figure out how to love each other enough to let go. 5 years after Alea left, Preston stood in his new penthouse office overlooking Charlotte's skyline, but success tasted nothing like he'd imagined. The investor deal had gone through exactly as planned. James Morrison, old money Charlotte elite, had taken Preston under his wing like a project. You've got the hunger, son, Morrison had said. Now let me teach you how to look the part. Preston learned fast. Designer suits replaced his off-the-rack clothes. His accent softened, rough edges polished away. He joined the country club, attended charity galas, and learned which wines to order at which restaurants. The money followed. First hundreds of thousands, then millions. Real estate deals in Ballantyne, Myers Park, South End. His portfolio exploded from one building to an empire worth $80 million. But every success felt hollow without Alea to share it with. He'd kept tabs on her through mutual friends in Atlanta. She'd had the baby, their daughter, Zura. Beautiful, brilliant, with his eyes and her mother's fierce independence. Alea was working as a teaching assistant, finishing her degree online, raising Zara alone. Preston sent money monthly, no questions asked, more than enough to cover everything. But Alea only cashed half the checks. Her pride, he realized. Always her pride. The hardest part wasn't missing her. It was becoming someone she wouldn't recognize. You need a wife, Morrison told him over drinks at the club one evening. The right kind of wife. Someone who understands our world. That's when Morrison introduced him to Madison Vale. Connecticut-born, private school educated, with the kind of polished beauty that looked perfect in society photos. Madison was everything Preston had learned to appreciate in this new world. Sophisticated, well-connected, and completely comfortable with the life Preston had built. Their courtship was strategic more than passionate. Madison liked Preston's success story. The self-made man narrative played, well, at dinner parties. Preston appreciated Madison's connections and social grace. She was smart, funny when she wanted to be, and understood the game they were all playing. But she wasn't Alea. 2 years into dating Madison, Preston's daughter turned 4. He flew to Atlanta for her birthday party, held in Alea's modest apartment with balloons from the dollar store and a homemade cake. Zara ran to him the moment he walked through the door. "Daddy!" The word hit him like a physical blow. This beautiful little girl who barely knew him, who saw him maybe 6 times a year, still lit up like Christmas morning when he arrived. Alea stood in the kitchen doorway, watching. She was still gorgeous, but different. Older, tired, the spark in her eyes dimmed by years of single motherhood and financial stress. "She talks about you all the time," Alea said quietly while Zara played with her new toys. "I should be here more. You have a life to build." "I understand that." But he caught the hurt in her voice. The question she'd never ask. Why wasn't their life enough? That night, after Zara fell as. He was quiet for a long time. "I have everything I thought I wanted." That's not the same thing. They almost kissed that night. Almost threw away years of careful distance and respectful boundaries. But Preston's phone buzzed with a text from Madison, and the moment shattered. Flying back to Charlotte, Preston made a decision that would change everything. He proposed to Madison 3 months later. She said yes immediately, already planning a wedding that would be featured in Southern Living magazine. But guilt ate at him daily. Zara was his daughter, and the world didn't even know she existed. The solution came to him during a sleepless night 6 months before the wedding. He called Alea at midnight. "I have a proposition. Preston, it's late and... Hear me out. What if you move to Charlotte? What if you work for me?" The silence stretched so long he thought she'd hung up. "As what?" "Zara's nanny. Live-in position. Full salary, benefits, private quarters in the main house. You'd be close to your family. Zara would grow up around her father, and you get to keep your secret while playing happy family with your fiancé." Her words cut deep because they were true. "It will be temporary," he said, "until I figure out how to tell Madison about Zara. About us. There is no us, Preston. There will always be an us. We have a daughter." Another long silence. "What's the real reason?" she asked finally. "Why now?" Preston closed his eyes. "Because I'm about to marry someone else, and I can't stand the thought of our daughter growing up thinking I don't want her in my life." "But you don't want me in your life." "That's not true." "Prove it." The challenge hung between them across the miles. Preston knew what she was asking. Choose her. Choose their family. Choose the life they could have built together. But he also knew he wasn't brave enough to throw away everything he'd worked for. "Move to Charlotte," he said instead. "Let me take care of both of you. I'll figure out the rest." What Preston didn't realize was that some secrets grow heavier over time, and that the woman he was about to marry would never accept sharing her future husband with anyone, especially not with the mother of his hidden child. The stage was set for the collision that would destroy them all. Alea moved into Preston's Charlotte mansion 3 months before his wedding to Madison and immediately understood why he'd fallen in love with this life. The house sat on 2 acres in Myers Park, all stone and glass with windows that overlooked manicured gardens Preston paid someone else to maintain. Her quarters, a full apartment above the 3-car garage, were bigger than the place she'd shared with her sister in Atlanta. Zara adapted faster than her mother. At 5 years old, she treated the whole arrangement like an adventure. Her own playroom, a backyard with a swing set Preston had installed overnight, and most importantly, daily access to the father she'd been seeing only on weekends and holidays. "Mama, why does Daddy have such a big house?" Zara asked on their second night, as Alea tucked her into the new bed Preston had bought specifically for her. "Because he works very hard." "Will we live here forever?" Alea kissed her forehead. "We'll see, baby." But privately, she wondered what the hell she'd agreed to. The first month was awkward dance of boundaries and unspoken rules. Preston left for work early, came home late, and spent evenings in his home office or at events with Madison. Alea and Zara existed in parallel to his real life. During the day, Alea worked as Zara's nanny and tutor, but it felt strange calling it work when she was just being a mother in a bigger house. Preston had insisted on paying her a salary that was triple what she'd made in Atlanta, plus covering all of Zara's expenses. "I don't want you to worry about money," he'd said when he handed her the first check. "Focus on being happy here." "Happy?" Such a simple word for such a complicated situation. The hardest moments came when Madison visited. Madison Vale was everything Alea wasn't: tall, blonde, polished like expensive jewelry. She moved through Preston's house like she owned it, which Alea supposed she soon would. "You must be the nanny," Madison said during their first meeting, extending a manicured hand. Preston mentioned he'd hired someone to help with his goddaughter. Goddaughter? That was the story they'd agreed on. Preston's business partner had died in an accident, leaving behind a young daughter who needed care. Preston, being generous and family-oriented, had stepped in to help. The lie tasted bitter in Alea's mouth, but she smiled and shook Madison's hand. "I'm Alea. It's nice to meet you. Such an unusual name. Is it African?" The question wasn't asked with malice, but Alea heard the categorization happening. Black nanny with the exotic name, caring for the poor orphan child while the white socialite prepared to become the lady of the house. "It's Arabic," Alea replied. "It means sublime." Madison smiled the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. How lovely. From that moment, Madison treated Alea with polite condescension wrapped in Southern charm. Never outright rude, but with a constant undertone that reminded everyone present where they stood in the hierarchy. The worst part was watching Preston navigate between his two worlds. With Madison, he was the successful businessman she'd fallen in love with. Confident, polished, discussing wine selections for the wedding and vacation homes in Hamptons. With Zara, he was softer, more like the man Alea had fallen in love with years ago. He'd sit on the floor building Lego castles, reading bedtime stories with different voices for each character. And with Alea, he was careful, polite, distant enough to maintain boundaries, but she'd catch him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't quite read. Late one evening, 2 months into the arrangement, Preston found Alea in the kitchen making tea after putting Zara to bed. "How are you settling in?" he asked, pouring himself a glass of water. "Fine. Zara loves it here. And you?" Alea looked up from her mug. They were alone in the kitchen, dim lighting making the moment feel more intimate than it should have been. "It's complicated. I know this isn't easy. Do you?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended. "Because from where I'm standing, you get everything you want. Your daughter close by, your fiancé who doesn't know she exists, and me to manage the parts of your life you don't want to explain." Preston stepped closer. "That's not fair, isn't it?" They stood there in the quiet kitchen, years of history and hurt stretched between them. Alea could smell his cologne, different now, more expensive than what he used to wear. Everything about him was more expensive now. "I'm trying to do what's best for everyone," he said. "And what happens after the wedding? Do I keep pretending to be the hired help while you play house with your wife?" "Madison is good for my career, for my business, and I was good for your soul." The words hung in the air between them. Preston's hand moved toward her face, almost touching, then dropped. "Don't," Alea whispered. "Don't touch me unless you mean it." "I always mean it with you." "Then why are you marrying someone else?" He didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, but it wasn't one she wanted to hear. That night, Alea lay in her bed above the garage, listening to the sounds of Preston moving around the main house below. Some nights, she heard Madison's voice, laughing at something on the phone or discussing wedding plans. She'd made a deal with the devil, she realized. Financial security and proximity to her daughter in exchange for watching the man she'd never stopped loving build a life with someone else. But the worst part wasn't the jealousy or the loneliness. The worst part was that Zara was starting to ask questions. "Mama, why don't you eat dinner with Daddy and Ms. Madison? Why do we live above the garage instead of in the big house? Why does Ms. Madison call you the help when Daddy isn't around?" Because that last one, Alea had heard it too. Madison's true feelings coming out when she thought no one important was listening. Change was coming. Alea could feel it building like a storm on the horizon. And when it hit, everyone was going to get hurt. Have you ever been in a situation where keeping the peace meant betraying yourself? Because that's exactly where Alea found herself, loving a man she couldn't have, raising their daughter in secret, while watching him prepare to promise forever to someone else. The question wasn't if this arrangement would explode. The question was when. Madison Vale had been raised to recognize threats, and the moment she walked into Preston's house and saw Alea, every alarm bell in her well-bred head started ringing. It wasn't just that the nanny was beautiful. Madison had dealt with beautiful women her entire life. It was the way Preston's voice changed when he said Alea's name, the way he watched her move around his kitchen like she belonged there. Madison had spent 28 years learning how to read men, and Preston Hartley was sending signals he didn't even realize he was broadcasting. "Tell me about this goddaughter arrangement again," Madison said one evening as she and Preston reviewed wedding seating charts in his study. "Marcus died in that car accident 2 years ago. Zara needed somewhere stable to live while the estate gets sorted out. And the mother died in the same accident." The lie came so easily that Madison almost believed it. Almost. But she'd grown up in country club circles where secrets were currency, and she knew the difference between truth and convenient fiction. "How long have you known this child?" "Since she was born. Marcus was my business partner in Atlanta. But I've never heard you mention a Marcus before." Preston's jaw tightened slightly. "It's painful to talk about." Madison nodded sympathetically, but mentally filed away every inconsistency. The way Preston's eyes lit up when Zara ran to him. The casual intimacy between him and Alea that spoke of years of history, not months of employment. Most telling of all, the way Zara looked exactly like Preston around the eyes. Madison wasn't stupid. She'd graduated summa cum laude from Duke, spoke 3 languages, and could spot a lie from across a ballroom. But she was also pragmatic. Preston Hartley was worth $80 million and rising. He was handsome, successful, and treated her like the society princess she'd been raised to be. If he had some messy history with his help, well, that was manageable. Men had needs. Men had pasts. Madison's own father had kept a mistress in Charleston for 15 years, and her mother had pretended not to know while enjoying the benefits of being Mrs. Hamilton Vale III. But there were rules to these arrangements, lines that couldn't be crossed. The first rule, the wife came first. Always. The second rule, the help stayed in their place. Madison began testing boundaries immediately. "Alea, could you serve dinner tonight?" she'd ask sweetly when she came for evening visits. "Preston and I have wedding details to discuss. The child seems restless during our grown-up conversations. Perhaps she should eat in the kitchen with you?" Small assertions of dominance, delivered with a smile and just enough plausible deniability that Preston couldn't call her out directly. Alea never fought back. She'd simply nod and remove herself and Zara from whatever space Madison wanted to claim. But Madison caught the flash of anger in her eyes, the way her jaw tightened when she was dismissed. Good. Let her know where she stood. The real test came 6 weeks before the wedding. Madison arrived early for a dress-fitting appointment, letting herself in with the key Preston had given her. She expected to find the house empty. Preston was at work, and she thought Alea would be out with the child. Instead, she walked into the kitchen to find Preston and Alea standing close together by the counter, his hand on her arm, both of them speaking in low, intense voices. They sprang apart when they saw her, but not before Madison caught the electricity between them. The kind of current that existed between lovers, not employer and employee. "Am I interrupting something?" Madison asked, voice honey-sweet and deadly. "Just discussing Zara's school enrollment," Preston said quickly. "Of course." Madison smiled. "Alea, dear, could you give us some privacy? I need to discuss something with my fiancé." Alea left without a word, but the look she gave Preston as she walked out said everything Madison needed to know. "She's quite devoted to her job," Madison said once they were alone. "She cares about Zara." "I'm sure she does. Tell me, darling, how long did you say you've known her?" "She came highly recommended when I needed help with Zara." Another lie. Madison was keeping count. That night, she did what any smart woman in her position would do. She hired a private investigator. Within a week, she had a file that painted a very different picture than the one Preston had been selling. Alea Washington, 29 years old. Originally from Detroit, spent several years in Atlanta working as a waitress while finishing her education degree. No record of employment with any family named Marcus. But most interesting of all, a birth certificate for Zara Washington, born 5 years ago in Atlanta. Father's name, Preston Hartley. Madison sat in her Buckhead condo, staring at the documents spread across her dining room table, and felt something cold settle in her chest. Preston had lied about everything. The dead business partner, the orphan goddaughter, even a nanny's role in his life. This wasn't just an affair. This was a whole secret family. For the first time since her engagement, Madison questioned whether she was making the right choice. Not because she couldn't handle Preston having a past. She could. But because he'd lied so completely, so elaborately, that she wondered what else he was hiding. Then she looked at the ring on her finger. 10 carats, flawless, worth more than most people made in 5 years. She thought about the life they were building together, the social status that came with being Mrs. Preston Hartley, the security of marrying into his empire. Madison had been raised to make strategic decisions, not emotional ones. She could work with this situation. She could manage a secret baby and a former lover, as long as they stayed in their proper places. But first, she needed to make sure everyone understood the new rules. Madison picked up her phone and dialed Preston's number. "Darling, we need to talk. I think it's time I got more involved with Zara's care. After all, I'm going to be her stepmother soon." The pause on the other end of the line told her everything she needed to know. Preston was scared, which meant he still cared about Alea more than was convenient for Madison's future. Time to remind everyone who was really in charge. The confrontation at the brunch was already forming in Madison's mind. She just needed the right moment, the right audience, to make her point crystal clear. Some wars were won with bullets. Others were won with perfectly timed humiliation. Madison Vale had been trained for both. Living a double life was slowly killing Preston from the inside out. Monday through Friday, he was the successful businessman Madison had fallen in love with. Weekend charity galas, dinner parties with Charlotte's elite, conversations about portfolio diversification and which private schools had the best networking opportunities. But every morning at 6 a.m., before Madison woke up, he'd slip out to the garage apartment to have coffee with Alea and breakfast with Zara. Those 30 minutes were the only time all day when he felt like himself. "Daddy, why can't you eat with us all the time?" Zara asked one Tuesday morning, syrup from her pancakes sticky on her chin. Preston glanced at Alea, who was carefully not meeting his eyes. "Because Daddy has work to do, baby girl. But you eat with Ms. Madison at the big house." The logic of a 5-year-old was devastating in its simplicity. Preston had no good answer that wouldn't require explanations a child shouldn't have to hear. "Ms. Madison is going to be Daddy's wife," he said finally, "so she gets to eat in the big house. When I grow up, can I be your wife too?" Alea's coffee mug hit the table a little too hard. "Finish your breakfast, Zara. We need to get you ready for day camp." Preston's heart broke watching his daughter's face fall. She didn't understand why the answer was no, why Daddy couldn't love both of them the same way. Hell, Preston didn't understand it either. After Zara left for camp, the apartment fell into the familiar awkward silence that had become routine between him and Alea. "She's going to figure out soon," Alea said, clearing breakfast dishes. "I know. And Madison's getting suspicious." "I know that too. So what's the plan, Preston?" Because this arrangement is getting harder to maintain every day. He wanted to tell her he was working on it, that he was trying to find a way to bring their worlds together without destroying everything he'd built. But the truth was, he was paralyzed by the impossible choice between the life he'd created and the life he actually wanted. The pressure was affecting his business too. Preston found himself distracted during important meetings, missing calls from major clients, showing up late to events with Madison because he'd lost track of time reading bedtime stories to Zara. "You seem distant lately," Madison commented one evening as they drove home from a fundraising dinner. "Is everything all right? Just work stress. Maybe you need a vacation. We could go to Martha's Vineyard for a long weekend. My parents have been asking when they'll meet you properly." The thought of spending a weekend playing the perfect fiancé while his real family waited at home made Preston's stomach turn. After the wedding, "Things are too busy right now." Madison studied his profile in the dim light of the car. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? We're partners now." Partners. The word felt clinical compared to what he'd had with Alea. Business arrangement dressed up as romance. But Preston nodded and squeezed Madison's hand. I know. That night, after Madison went home to her own place, Preston found himself standing in the garden between the main house and the garage apartment, looking up at the light in Alea's kitchen window. He wondered what she was doing. Reading, probably. Alea had always been a night reader, curled up with a book and a cup of tea after long days. He wondered if she still read romance novels like she used to, then immediately pushed the thought away. His phone buzzed. A text from Alea. Zara's asking why you look sad all the time. Preston stared at the message for a long time before typing back. What should I tell her? The truth. She's 5. She's not stupid. Preston looked up at her window again. The light was still on. 3 floors of space between them, but it might as well have been 3 countries. Or choose Alea and Zara, and walk away from the empire he'd spent years creating? The next morning brought a new complication. Preston was in his office when his assistant buzzed him. Mr. Hartley? There's a woman here to see you. Says it's about your daughter. Preston's blood went cold. My daughter? That's what she said. She won't give me her name, but she's very insistent. Preston's mind raced through possibilities. Teachers from Zara's day camp? Social workers? Someone who'd figured out the truth about their arrangement? Send her in. The woman who walked into his office was elegant, professional, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. She introduced herself as Caroline Webb from a private investigation firm. I'll cut right to the chase, Mr. Hartley. I've been hired to look into your personal situation. Specifically, your relationship with Alea Washington and your daughter Zara. Preston's mouth went dry. I don't know what you're talking about. Birth certificate says otherwise. She placed a folder on his desk, along with employment records, bank statements, and some very interesting photos of you 3 together at Zara's birthday party last year. Preston opened the folder with shaking hands. Everything was there. Every lie he'd told, every secret he'd tried to keep, laid out in black and white documentation. Who hired you? Caroline Webb smiled. I think you know the answer to that. Madison. Of course it was Madison. What does she want? That's between you and your fiancé. But I'd recommend having that conversation sooner rather than later. In my experience, women like Ms. Vale don't like being made to look foolish. After the investigator left, Preston sat alone in his office, staring at the evidence of his double life spread across his mahogany desk. Everything was about to come crashing down. The only question now was whether he'd choose to control the narrative or let Madison destroy them all on her own terms. Preston picked up his phone and dialed Madison's number. We need to talk, he said when she answered. Tonight. Yes, Madison replied sweetly. We certainly do. The countdown to the confrontation had begun. The conversation between Preston and Madison that night changed everything. They met at Madison's Buckhead condo, away from prying eyes and little ears. Madison had set the scene perfectly. Wine chilled, lighting dim, her investigator's files spread across the coffee table like evidence in a murder trial. Sit down, darling, she said when Preston arrived, her voice carrying a sweetness that didn't match the ice in her eyes. Preston saw the documents immediately. His stomach dropped to his shoes, but he tried to play it cool. What's all this? Oh, just some light reading about my future husband's secret family. The words hung in the air like a slap. Preston sank into the chair across from her, knowing his world was about to change forever. Madison, I can explain. Can you? Because I'm looking at a birth certificate that says you have a 5-year-old daughter with your so-called nanny. I'm looking at bank records showing you've been supporting them for years. I'm looking at photos of you 3 together, looking like the perfect little family. Her voice never rose above conversational level, which somehow made it more terrifying. The business partner who died in a car accident? Made up. The orphan goddaughter? Your actual daughter. The tragic backstory? Complete fiction. Preston rubbed his face with both hands. It's complicated. No, it's not. It's actually very simple. You lied to me about everything that mattered. The question now is what we're going to do about it. Madison smiled, and for the first time since he'd known her, Preston saw the steel underneath all that southern charm. Oh yes, darling. Because despite your creative relationship with the truth, I'm still planning to marry you. This situation is manageable, but only if we handle it correctly. Preston stared at her. You still want to get married? Even knowing about Alea and Zara, I want to marry Preston Hartley, successful businessman and community leader. The man with the $80 million portfolio and the bright political future. Your little family complication doesn't change that. They're not a complication. Zara is my daughter, and she can continue being your daughter. Privately, quietly, with appropriate boundaries in place. Madison poured herself more wine, completely calm while Preston's world fell apart. Here's what's going to happen, she continued. Your daughter and her mother will move out of the house. I'll help you find them a nice place across town. Close enough for you to visit, far enough away that they're not part of our daily lives. You want me to kick them out? I want you to establish appropriate boundaries between your past and your future. And if I refuse? Madison's smile turned razor sharp. Then I'll make sure everyone in Charlotte knows exactly who Preston Hartley really is. The country club, your business partners, your clients, the charity board you sit on. All those people who've welcomed you into their world based on the image you've carefully constructed. The threat was delivered so sweetly, it took Preston a moment to process what she was really saying. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice. Keep your secret family hidden where they belong, or watch your business empire crumble when everyone realizes you've been lying about who you are. Preston stood up, pacing to the window. Charlotte's skyline glittered below them. All those buildings and dreams he'd spent years building. What about love? He asked quietly. What about it? Don't you want to marry someone who actually loves you? Madison's laugh was like breaking glass. Oh, sweet Preston. Love is a luxury for people who don't understand how the world really works. I want security, status, and a husband who won't embarrass me in public. You want to keep your business and your reputation intact. That's more valuable than love. Alea would never think that way. Alea is the help. I'm going to be your wife. There's a difference. The casual cruelty in her voice made Preston's hands clench into fists. Don't talk about her like that. I'll talk about her however I want. She's the one who chose to be your dirty little secret. I'm the one choosing to be your future. Preston turned back to face her. And if I choose differently, then you'll lose everything you've worked for. Your business contacts will dry up overnight when they realize you've been lying to their faces for years. Your political aspirations? Gone. Your reputation? Destroyed. Madison stood up, smoothing down her dress. But it's your choice, darling. Your secret family or your empire. You can't have both. The ultimatum settled between them like a death sentence. Preston drove home that night in silence, his mind racing through impossible calculations. Everything Madison had said was true. His success was built on relationships, trust, image. If the truth came out the wrong way, it would destroy him professionally. But the thought of forcing Alea and Zara out of his house, out of his daily life, felt like cutting off his own limbs. Back at the mansion, he sat in his car in the driveway for 20 minutes, staring up at the light in Alea's apartment window. His phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Sleep on it. But remember, the wedding is in 3 weeks. Decisions need to be made. Preston climbed the stairs to Alea's apartment, using the key she'd given him for emergencies. She was sitting at her kitchen table, grading papers from the tutoring job she'd taken to keep busy during Zara's camp hours. Hey, she said, looking up with surprise. Everything okay? Madison knows. Alea's pen stopped moving. Knows what? Everything. About us, about Zara, about the lies I've been telling. Alea set down her pen very carefully. Ow! Private investigator. She has photos, documents, everything. They sat in silence while the weight of the revelation settled over them. What did she say? Alea asked finally. Preston told her about Madison's ultimatum, watching Alea's face grow more distant with every word. So she wants us gone, Alea said when he finished. I haven't agreed to anything, but you're considering it. Preston couldn't lie to her. Not anymore. I don't know what to do. Alea nodded slowly. Yes, you do. You're just afraid to admit it. What's that supposed to mean? It means you've already chosen Preston. You chose years ago when you picked building your empire over building a life with us. This is just Madison making it official. That's not fair, isn't it? You moved us into the garage apartment instead of the main house. You introduced me, as the hired help instead of the mother of your child. You've been preparing for this moment since the day we moved here. Have you ever realized that the choice you thought you were avoiding, you'd already made? Preston wanted to argue, to defend himself, but Alea was right. Every compromise, every lie, every moment he'd chosen convenience over truth had been leading to this. So what happens now? He asked. Alea looked towards Zara's bedroom, where their daughter slept peacefully, unaware that her world was about to change again. Now you decide if you're brave enough to fight for what you actually want, or if you're going to let Madison make the choice for you. The clock on Alea's wall ticked toward midnight. In the distance, Preston could see the lights of his mansion, the symbol of everything he'd achieved and everything he stood to lose. 3 weeks until the wedding. 3 weeks to decide between the life he'd built and the life he'd abandoned. 3 weeks to figure out if love was worth more than everything else combined. But first, he had to survive the engagement party Madison had planned for this weekend. The party where Charlotte's elite would gather to celebrate their upcoming marriage. The party where one wrong word, one suspicious glance, one moment of weakness could destroy them all. Because Madison wasn't done playing games. She was just getting started. The silence after Madison's slap felt like thunder rolling across the mountains. Every guest at the brunch stood frozen, champagne glasses suspended midair, watching the drama unfold like a car crash in slow motion. Madison's face was twisted with rage, her perfectly applied makeup now smeared with tears of humiliation. She had just slapped Alea, the woman she thought was nothing more than hired help. But Preston's reaction wasn't what anyone expected. He laughed, not a cruel laugh, not an agreeing laugh, a laugh of pure disbelief. "You just slapped the mother of my child," Preston said, his voice cutting through the Georgia heat like a blade through silk. Have you ever watched someone's world crumble in real time? That's exactly what happened to Madison's face. The color drained from her cheeks, as if someone had pulled a plug. "What did you just say?" Madison whispered, her voice barely audible above the shocked murmurs of the guests. Alea stood there with quiet dignity, her hand pressed gently to her cheek where the slap had landed. She didn't cry. She didn't retaliate. She simply looked at Preston with those same beautiful eyes that had saved him 12 years ago in that Atlanta diner. "You heard me correctly," Preston continued, stepping closer to Madison. "Alea isn't just Zara's nanny. She's Zara's mother, the biological mother of my daughter." The guests erupted in whispers. Cell phones came out. This was the kind of scandal that would be all over social media within the hour. Madison's perfectly manicured hands began shaking. "You're lying. You told me Zara's mother was some random hookup who abandoned you both. You told me she was out of the picture forever." "I lied," Preston said simply. "And now you know why." Can you imagine being in Madison's designer heels right now? Everything she thought she knew about her perfect life was crumbling like a house of cards in a hurricane. "So you've been sleeping with the help this whole time?" Madison screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "While I've been planning our wedding. While I've been introducing you to my family." "No," Preston said firmly. "Alea and I haven't been together romantically since before Zara was born. She agreed to come work as Zara's nanny, so our daughter could have her mother in her life. It was supposed to be temporary until I figured out how to tell you the truth." Alea finally spoke, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "I never meant for this to happen, Miss Madison. I was just trying to be close to my daughter." "Your daughter?" Madison's laugh was bitter and sharp. "That little girl calls me mommy. She thinks I'm going to be her mother when Preston and I get married next month. She calls you that because I asked her to," Alea said quietly, "because I wanted her to feel like she belonged in your world." The weight of that sacrifice hit everyone present. Here was a woman who had given up her own child's affection to make another woman feel secure. Have you ever met someone so selfless that it makes your own problems seem small? That's the power Alea had over everyone who knew her real story. Preston turned to face his guests, many of whom were business associates and social connections. "I owe everyone here an apology for this scene. This should have been handled privately. But since it's out in the open now, let me be crystal clear about something." He walked over to Alea and gently took her hand. The intimacy of the gesture sent shockwaves through the crowd. 12 years ago, I was broke, depressed, and ready to end my life. I had lost everything in Detroit, my business, my home, my hope. I drove to Atlanta with my last $20 and sat in a diner planning how I was going to die. The crowd was dead silent now. Even Madison stopped her hysterical breathing to listen. This woman, Preston continued, squeezing Alea's hand, served me coffee and somehow saw right through my fake smile. She sat with me during her break and talked me off the ledge. Literally, she saved my life that night. Alea's eyes filled with tears, but she maintained her composure. She had heard Preston tell this story before, but never in front of an audience like this. We fell in love over the next 2 years. Real love. The kind that changes you from the inside out. She helped me rebuild my confidence, my business plan, everything. When she got pregnant with Zara, I was the happiest man alive. "Then why aren't you together?" someone from the crowd called out. Preston's jaw tightened. Because I was an idiot. When my business started taking off and I began making serious money, people kept telling me I needed a different kind of partner. Someone who fit the image. Someone who could navigate high society and country club politics. The truth hung in the air, like humidity, thick and uncomfortable. I convinced myself that Alea would be happier with someone from her own background. Someone who could give her a simple, normal life. So I broke up with her when Zara was 6 months old. Madison's face was pale as paper. "So you chose me because I looked the part?" Preston didn't answer immediately, but his silence was answer enough. "Do you know what it feels like to realize you're someone's consolation prize?" Madison was living that nightmare in front of 30 people. "The engagement," Madison whispered. "The wedding plans. The life we've been building. Was any of it real?" "I thought it could be," Preston said honestly. "I thought I could learn to love you the way I loved her. But watching you slap the mother of my child just proved that some things can't be learned or faked." Madison looked around at all the staring faces, at the phones recording her humiliation, at the man she thought she knew slipping away from her like sand through her fingers. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You think you can embarrass me like this? You think you can throw away everything we've built for some fantasy from your past?" She turned to leave, then spun back around one more time. "Enjoy your reunion," she snarled. "But remember, I know things about your business dealings that could destroy more than just your reputation." And with that threat hanging in the air like smoke from a house fire, Madison stormed off the deck, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the Georgia summer heat. What happens when love, lies, and revenge collide? You're about to find out. The guests began leaving shortly after Madison's dramatic exit, whispering among themselves and stealing glances at Preston and Alea. But the real conversation was just beginning. Zara came running out from the house where she had been playing with the other children, oblivious to the adult drama that had just unfolded on the deck. "Daddy, why did Miss Madison leave without saying goodbye?" she asked, tugging on Preston's shirt. Preston knelt down to his daughter's level, his heart breaking as he looked into eyes that were identical to Alea's. How do you explain complicated adult relationships to a 7-year-old? "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements. Baby girl," he said softly. "Madison had to go home early today." Zara nodded, accepting the explanation with the simple trust that children have in their parents. Then she turned to Alea. "Alea, my cheek feels hot where Miss Madison touched it. Can you get me some ice like you do when I fall down?" The innocent request hit both adults like a physical blow. Zara had witnessed the slap but didn't understand what it meant. Have you ever had to protect a child from adult cruelty? It's one of the hardest things a parent has to do. Alea's composure finally cracked. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she gathered Zara into her arms. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's get you taken care of." As they walked toward the house, Zara chattered away, completely unaware that her world was about to change forever. "Alea, you're the best nanny ever. I hope you never leave us like all the other nannies did." Alea met Preston's eyes over Zara's head. The pain in her expression was unmistakable. How long could they keep living this lie? Once Zara was settled with ice cream and cartoons in the living room, Preston and Alea finally had their first private conversation in months. "We need to talk," Preston said, leading her out to his study. The room was filled with awards and photos from his business success, all achievements that had come after he left her. Alea had never been comfortable in this space. It represented everything that had driven them apart. Madison was right about one thing, Alea said before Preston could speak. This situation isn't fair to anyone, especially not to Zara. I know, Preston said, running his hands through his hair. I've been trying to figure out how to handle this for months. Madison kept pressuring me to set a wedding date, and I kept making excuses. Because you don't love her, Alea said quietly. It wasn't a question. Preston was silent for a long moment, staring out the window at the aftermath of the brunch, scattered chairs, abandoned plates, the remnants of a party that had gone horribly wrong. I've been lying to everyone, including myself, he finally admitted. I convinced myself that love wasn't enough. That what we had was just young and foolish. That building a life required more PRA. Alea sat down heavily in one of the leather chairs. Preston, we can't go backward. Too much has happened. Too much time has passed. Can't we? Preston moved closer to her. We're not the same people we were 4 years ago, but the connection is still there. You feel it too. Do you believe that some connections transcend time and circumstances? That's the question both of them were grappling with. It's not that simple, Alea said. You chose Madison because she fit your image of success. What happens the next time someone suggests, I'm not good enough for your world? The question hung between them like a challenge. Preston knew she was right to ask it. I was weak before, he said. I let other people's opinions matter more than my own heart. But watching Madison slap you today, it crystallized everything for me. He knelt down in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. I don't care if dating you costs me business deals or country club memberships. I don't care if people whisper about us behind our backs. You say that now, Alea said, tears in her eyes. But when the pressure builds again, then I'll remember this moment, Preston said firmly. I'll remember how I felt watching another woman disrespect the mother of my child. I'll remember how empty I felt trying to love someone else when my heart belongs to you. Their faces were inches apart now. The same magnetic pull that had drawn them together in that Atlanta diner 12 years ago was still there, stronger than ever. What about Zara? Alea whispered. She's been calling Madison Mommy for 6 months. How do we explain that her real mother has been here all along, pretending to be the help? We tell her the truth, Preston said. Age appropriately, but honestly. Kids are more resilient than we think, and she deserves to know that her mother never abandoned her. Before Alea could respond, they heard Zara's voice calling from the living room. Daddy, Alea, come quick. Miss Madison is on TV. They rushed to the living room, where Zara was pointing at the large screen. A local entertainment news show was running a breaking story with the headline, Millionaire's secret baby mama exposed at brunch gone wrong. Someone had recorded Madison's outburst and posted it online. The video was already going viral. Oh no, Alea breathed, sinking onto the couch. The reporter was speaking directly to the camera. Sources confirm that Charlotte real estate mogul Preston Hartley has been secretly employing his ex-lover as his daughter's nanny, while engaged to Connecticut's socialite Madison Whitmore. The explosive confrontation was captured on video by multiple guests at today's brunch gathering. Have you ever had your private business become public entertainment? It's a special kind of nightmare. Preston grabbed the remote and turned off the TV, but the damage was already done. Zara was looking back and forth between them with confusion in her young eyes. Why are you and Alea on TV, Daddy? Preston realized that there was no more hiding, no more pretending, no more living in the shadows of half-truths and convenient lies. The secret was out, and now they had to face the consequences together. Sit down, baby girl, Preston said gently. Daddy and Alea need to tell you something very important. The moment of truth had finally arrived. Zara sat between Preston and Alea on the couch, her little hands folded in her lap, sensing that this was one of those serious grown-up conversations that would change things. Preston took a deep breath. How do you explain years of complicated decisions to a 7-year-old? Zara, you know how much Daddy loves you, right? Yes, Daddy. And I love you too. Good. And you know how much Alea cares about you. Zara nodded, reaching over to take Aleya's hand. Aleya takes care of me better than anyone ever has. She knows exactly how I like my sandwiches cut, and she never gets mad when I have bad dreams. Aleya squeezed Zara's small hand, fighting back tears. That's because, Preston said carefully, Aleya isn't just someone who works for us. She's someone very special who loves you very, very much. I know that, Daddy. Aleya loves me like a mommy loves her little girl. The innocent observation hit both adults like lightning. Children see truth that adults spend years trying to hide. Zara, Aleya said softly, what if I told you that's exactly right? What if I told you that I do love you like a mommy loves her little girl? Zara tilted her head, considering this. You mean like how Miss Madison says she loves me? Different from that, Preston said. Zara, Aleya is your mommy. Your real mommy. She's the one who carried you in her tummy and brought you into this world. Have you ever watched a child's face as they process life-changing information? It's like watching flowers bloom in fast motion. Confusion, recognition, then pure joy. Zara's eyes went wide. She looked back and forth between Preston and Aleya several times, as if confirming what she had always suspected in her heart. You mean, you're my real mommy? She asked Aleya. Yes, sweetheart. I'm your real mommy. Zara launched herself into Aleya's arms with the enthusiasm only children possess. I knew it. I knew it. Jennifer at school said that nannies don't usually know everything about you like you do. She said only mommies know when you're getting sick before you even feel bad. Aleya held her daughter tight, finally able to show the full depth of her love without pretending it was just professional care. Why didn't you tell me before? Zara asked, pulling back to look at Aleya's face. Because, Preston said, Daddy made some mistakes. I thought it would be easier for everyone if we kept it a secret for a while. But secrets aren't good, Zara said with the moral clarity that children possess. You always tell me that secrets can hurt people's feelings. You're absolutely right, baby girl. And I'm sorry for keeping this secret for so long. Zara seemed to accept this apology with the forgiveness that comes naturally to children. Then her face scrunched up in thought. What about Miss Madison? Is she still going to be my stepmommy? Preston and Aleya exchanged glances. This was the harder conversation. No, sweetheart, Preston said gently. Miss Madison and I aren't going to get married anymore. Because she was mean to Mommy? The word Mommy, coming from Zara's lips, made Aleya's heart soar and break at the same time. Partly because of that, Preston said, but mostly because Daddy realized he made a mistake. I thought I needed to marry someone different, but I was wrong. Do you love Mommy? Zara asked with the directness only children can manage. Preston looked at Aleya, really looked at her for the first time in years without the filter of shame or social expectations or fear. Yes, he said simply. I love you, Mommy, very much. I always have. Do you love Daddy? Zara asked Aleya. Aleya's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, baby. I love your daddy very much too. Then why can't we all live together like a real family? Out of the mouths of babes. The solution seemed so simple through a child's eyes. Have you ever noticed how children cut through adult complications like a knife through butter? They see what matters and ignore what doesn't. Before either adult could answer, Preston's phone started ringing. The caller ID showed Madison's name. I should probably take this, he said reluctantly. Madison's voice was so loud that even Zara could hear her screaming from across the room. You think you've won something, Preston? You think you can humiliate me in front of half of Charlotte's elite society and there won't be consequences? Madison, calm down. Let's talk about this like adults. Adults? You want to talk like adults? Fine. Here's some adult conversation for you. I'm calling off the wedding, obviously. But I'm also calling my lawyer. And my father's lawyer. And probably the IRS while I'm at it. Preston put the phone on speaker, not caring anymore who heard what. Are you threatening me, Madison? I'm promising you. That little arrangement you have with your offshore accounts, the ones you think nobody knows about, I know about them. I know about the cash deals that never get reported. I know about the shell companies. Preston's face went pale. Madison, you chose that woman and her bastard child over me. Fine, but you're going to pay for it. Literally. The line went dead. Zara was looking up at both of them with concern. Is the mean lady going to hurt us? Preston pulled his daughter close. No, baby. Daddy won't let anyone hurt you or Mommy. I promise. But as he said the words, he realized the full weight of the choice he was making. Choosing love over convenience. Choosing truth over image. Choosing his real family over his constructed one. And it was going to cost him. Possibly everything. Alea seemed to read his thoughts. Preston, maybe we should think about this more. Madison could destroy your business, your reputation. Let her try, Preston said with a conviction that surprised even himself. I spent 4 years choosing the easy path, the path that looked good on paper, and it made me miserable. He looked at Alea and Zara, his real family, sitting together on his couch. I'd rather be broke and honest than rich and living a lie. The phone rang again. This time, it was his lawyer. Preston looked at the two most important people in his world and made his choice. He turned off the phone. Whatever comes next, he said, we face it together. As a family. 6 months later, the autumn leaves were falling outside the windows of Preston's much smaller but infinitely happier home. The legal battles with Madison had been brutal, but ultimately unsuccessful. Her threats about offshore accounts had fallen flat when investigators found that Preston's business dealings, while aggressive, were completely legitimate. Her father's lawyers had been more bark than bite, but the court of public opinion had been harsher. Half of Preston's high society clients had dropped him after the scandal broke. Country club memberships were quietly revoked. Dinner party invitations stopped coming. Preston discovered he didn't miss any of it. He was making breakfast for his family, his real family, when Alea came downstairs wearing one of his old college t-shirts and a smile that made his heart race the same way it had 12 years ago in that Atlanta diner. Zara is getting ready for school, she said, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. She's excited about the mother-daughter art project today. Her first official mother-daughter project, Preston said, turning in her arms to kiss her forehead. How does it feel? Like everything I never knew I was missing, Alea said softly. The past 6 months hadn't been easy. Zara had needed time to adjust to calling Alea mom in public. There had been therapy sessions to work through the confusion of having her world restructured. But children are remarkably adaptable when they feel loved and secure. And Zara had never been more secure. Daddy, Mom, Zara called from upstairs. Can you help me find my art supplies? Mom. The word still made Alea's eyes well up with happy tears every time she heard it. Have you ever gotten something back that you thought was lost forever? It's like being given a second chance at your own life. Coming, sweetheart. Alea called back, but Preston caught her hand. Before you go up there, he said, I have something for you. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Not the enormous, flashy ring he had given Madison. Something simpler, more elegant, more real. Alea's breath caught in her throat. Preston, I know we're taking things slow, he said, opening the box to reveal a vintage diamond ring that somehow captured light and held it like a promise. I know we agreed to wait and make sure this was right for all of us, especially Zara. And I can't wait anymore. Not because I'm impatient, but because I'm certain. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He got down on one knee in their small kitchen, morning sunlight streaming through the windows, coffee cooling on the counter, the sound of their daughter getting ready for school floating down from upstairs. It was perfect in its imperfection. Alea Michelle Johnson, he said, using her full name like a prayer. Will you marry me? For real this time. Not because it looks right or fits some image, but because I can't imagine spending another day of my life without you. Do you believe in second chances? In love that survives separation and grows stronger in the process? Yes, Alea whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Yes, of course, yes. The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her finger all along. They were kissing when Zara came running downstairs, art supplies in hand, and stopped dead in her tracks. Are you guys kissing again? She asked with the exaggerated disgust that 7-year-olds reserve for parental affection. Yes, we are, Preston said, not letting go of Alea. Because we have some news for you. Zara looked back and forth between them, Then her eyes landed on the ring on Alea's finger. "Oh, my gosh," she screamed with delight. "Are you getting married? Are we going to be a real family?" "We already are a real family, baby," Alea said, scooping Zara into their group hug. "But yes, Daddy and I are getting married. Can I be the flower girl? Can we have cake? Can I help pick out your dress? Can we get a dog now that we're a real family?" The questions tumbled out of Zara faster than they could answer them, but her joy was infectious. Preston's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled. "What is it?" Alea asked. "Remember Marcus Williams from Detroit? My old business partner before everything fell apart?" "Of course. You've mentioned him. He just landed a major development contract in Nashville. He wanted to partner with him on it. Says he needs someone he can trust completely." Alea raised an eyebrow. "And you trust completely means?" "It means someone who's learned the difference between success and significance. Someone who knows that integrity matters more than image. Have you ever noticed that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what really matters?" "Are you going to take it?" Alea asked. Preston looked around their modest kitchen, at the woman he loved wearing his old t-shirt, at his daughter bouncing excitedly about wedding plans and potential puppies. "I'm going to talk to my family about it," he said, "because that's how real families make decisions." Later that evening, after Zara had gone to bed with her head full of wedding dreams, Preston and Alea sat on their small back porch, watching the stars come out. "Do you ever regret it?" Alea asked quietly. "Giving up the mansion, the status, the easy life?" Preston pulled her closer against his chest. "The only thing I regret is waiting so long to come home to where I belonged." "And where's that?" "Wherever you and Zara are." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of their middle-class neighborhood. Dogs barking, televisions playing, children laughing in nearby yards. It was the sound of real life. Messy, imperfect, genuine life. "Preston," Alea said sleepily, "I love you. Not the millionaire version, not the struggling version. Just you." And in that moment, Preston realized that he had finally found what he had been searching for all along. Not success that looked impressive from the outside, but a life that felt meaningful from the inside. The millionaire had laughed when his fiancée slapped the nanny. But the laugh wasn't cruel. It was the sound of a man finally waking up from a dream that was never really his. Sometimes the best love stories don't end with fairy tale weddings and mansions. Sometimes they end with quiet promises on small porches, with real families choosing each other over and over again. And sometimes that's the most beautiful ending of all. What did you think of Preston's journey from image to authenticity? Have you ever had to choose between what looked good and what felt right? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about love, second chances, and the courage to choose what matters most.